I'm Jacqueline, 34 female. I live in a small but cozy apartment in the city, a place I filled with art books, thriving plants, and the lingering scent of coffee. For the past decade, I've worked as a graphic designer, pouring my creativity into projects for a mid-sized marketing firm that I genuinely loved. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and it was stable. That is, until the world decided to pull the rug out from under me, and the person I thought would offer a hand to help me up chose to push me down instead. This is the story of how my own sister's twisted act of charity became the catalyst for me to reclaim not just my career, but my dignity. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, its subject line sterile and foreboding. Mandatory all-hands meeting, corporate restructuring. Just reading it sent a cold spike of anxiety through my chest. In the corporate world, restructuring is rarely a word that precedes good news. I spent the next hour in a state of suspended dread, my cursor hovering over half-finished designs as my mind raced through worst-case scenarios. My fears were confirmed in a swift, impersonal video call. My entire department was being eliminated, effective immediately. Our roles were being outsourced to a cheaper overseas firm. Just like that, 10 years of dedication, late nights, and award-winning campaigns were reduced to a severance package and a polite, "We wish you the best." I stumbled through the rest of the day in a daze, packing my desk into a sad cardboard box, exchanging hollow goodbyes with colleagues who were now strangers sharing the same misfortune. The walk home felt surreal. The bustling city sounds were muffled, and every cheerful face I passed felt like a personal insult. When I finally closed my apartment door behind me, the silence was deafening. My stability, my income, my professional identity, all gone in a single, bloodless corporate decision. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. My savings were decent, but not nearly enough to weather a long period of unemployment, especially with the high cost of living in the city. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and my car insurance payment was right behind it. I needed a buffer, a small safety net to keep me afloat while I frantically searched for a new job in a competitive market. That's when I thought of my sister, Victoria. Victoria lived in a different universe. While I was building a modest career based on talent and hard work, she had married Marcus, a man whose real estate developments were as sprawling as his ego. They lived in a ridiculously large mansion in the suburbs, a place with more bathrooms than people, and a fleet of luxury cars in the garage. Victoria had rebranded herself from a marketing coordinator to a luxury brand consultant, a vague title that seemed to involve attending galas, posting photos of $1,000 handbags on social media, and advising wealthy clients on how to appear even wealthier. She wasn't just comfortable, she was extravagantly rich. We were sisters, family, and despite the chasm between our lifestyles, I believed that core connection still meant something. I'd never asked her for a thing, priding myself on my independence, but this was an emergency. I wasn't asking for a handout, just a small, short-term loan, $5,000 maybe to cover my immediate expenses. I would pay her back with interest as soon as I landed a new job. Swallowing my pride, which felt like swallowing broken glass, I picked up the phone and called her. "Jacqueline, darling," she answered, her voice sounding distant and slightly bored, as if I'd interrupted something far more important. "What's up?" "I'm in the middle of a consultation for the annual charity gala." Of course she was. Charity for Victoria was less about altruism and more about networking and photo opportunities. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. The layoff, the restructuring, the sudden terror of my financial situation. I explained my plan to find new work immediately and emphasized that I just needed a temporary loan to bridge the gap. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for an uncomfortably long time. I could hear the faint clinking of ice in a glass. Finally, she sighed, a sound full of theatrical pity. "Oh, Jackie, that's just awful. I'm so sorry to hear that." Her sympathy felt thin, rehearsed. "But you know how Marcus and I are about finances. We believe in teaching people to fish, not just giving them a fish. Loaning money to family is always so messy. It creates a strange dynamic, you know? I was floored. This wasn't a stranger asking for a handout. I was her sister in a genuine crisis. The messy dynamic she was worried about was nothing compared to the very real mess of being unable to pay my rent. Victoria, I'm not asking for a gift, I said, my voice trembling slightly with a mixture of desperation and disbelief. It's a loan. I will sign a contract. I will pay you interest. This is what family is for, isn't it? To help each other in a crisis. Well, that's a sweet, simplistic way to look at it, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. But in the real world, things are more complicated. Marcus has a very strict policy about these things. It's about fostering self-reliance. It would actually be a disservice to you to just hand over cash. It could make you complacent. Complacent? I had worked tirelessly since I was a teenager. I had built a career from nothing. The idea that a loan to prevent me from being evicted would make me complacent was so profoundly insulting that it left me speechless. She continued, "Look, let me talk to Marcus. We'll brainstorm some creative solutions for you. Don't you worry. We'll figure something out. We always do." The call ended with her promising to call me back. I hung up, feeling 100 times worse than before I'd called. The panic was now mixed with a burning, bitter sense of humiliation. I wasn't just unemployed. I was a charity case in the eyes of my own sister. I had reached out for a lifeline and had been handed a lecture on self-reliance from a woman who hadn't had to rely on herself for a single day in the last 15 years. The foundation of our relationship, which I had always assumed was built on some bedrock of sisterly love, had just cracked, and I was terrified to see how deep the fissure went. The 2 days that followed my phone call with Victoria were a blur of anxiety and frantic activity. I spent hours polishing my resume, updating my online portfolio with my best work, and firing off applications to any design job that seemed remotely suitable. Each click of the submit button felt like a tiny prayer sent into the void. The rejection from Victoria stung more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about the money. It was the casual dismissal of my situation, the way she had framed my desperation as a character flaw. Her promise to brainstorm creative solutions hung in the air, a vague and unsettling assurance that did nothing to calm my nerves. I tried to push it to the back of my mind, focusing instead on what I could control: my job search. My best friend, Chloe, was my rock during this time. When I told her about the conversation, her reaction was immediate and furious on my behalf. "Are you kidding me?" she'd exclaimed over the phone, her voice tight with anger. "A disservice to you? The woman who buys a new $500 purse every week thinks a loan to her own sister is a moral hazard. That's not a philosophy, Jackie. That's a pathetic excuse." Chloe's righteous indignation was a small comfort, a validation that I wasn't crazy for feeling so hurt and betrayed. As a paralegal, she had a very black-and-white view of things like agreements and obligations, and to her, Victoria's familial obligation was crystal clear. She could write that check without even noticing the money was gone, Chloe had grumbled. "It's not about the money, it's about control." At the time, I thought she was being a little dramatic, but her words would prove to be chillingly prophetic. On Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from a former colleague, Jennifer. "Hey Jackie, so sorry again about what happened. I saw your sister's post. Just wanted to say I'm thinking of you and I've donated. Hang in there." I stared at the message, completely bewildered. My sister's post? Donated? What was she talking about? A cold dread washed over me. My fingers trembled as I opened my social media app. I didn't follow Victoria. Her curated life of impossible luxury was too irritating to watch on a daily basis, but her profile was public. It didn't take long to find it. Her latest post, shared less than an hour ago, was a professionally shot photo of us from a family gathering a few years back. In the picture, we were smiling, arms around each other. It looked like a picture of two loving, happy sisters, but the caption was a masterpiece of manipulative, self-serving prose. "Family is everything," it began, accompanied by a string of prayer hands and heart emojis. "As many of you know, I'm blessed to live a very fortunate life, but it's important to remember that not everyone is so lucky. My wonderfully talented and hardworking younger sister, Jacqueline, has sadly fallen on some very hard times. After an unexpected and devastating job loss, she's struggling to make ends meet. It breaks my heart to see her in this position. While Marcus and I are helping her personally in every way we can, I know the power of community. So, I've set up a GoFundMe to help my sweet sister get back on her feet. Any little bit helps. Let's show her she's not alone. #sisterly love community support family fur. Sent. Below the text was a link to a fundraising page with my name and my face on it. The goal was set at $10,000. The description on the page was even worse, a saccharine and embellished account of my plight, painting me as a helpless victim, a charity case in desperate need of handouts from strangers. It even mentioned my struggle to afford basic necessities. I felt the blood drain from my face, my breath hitched in my chest, and the room started to spin. This was her creative solution. Instead of quietly lending me the money I had asked for, money she could easily afford, she had turned my private, painful struggle into a public spectacle. She had monetized my humiliation for social media clout. She hadn't just refused to help me, she had used my vulnerability as content. The post was already flooded with comments. "You are such an amazing sister, Victoria," one read. "A true angel," said another. People were praising her for her generosity, her compassion, her selflessness, and they were donating. I watched in horror as the total ticked up. $50, $100, $250. Strangers, friends of hers, and even some of my own acquaintances were pitying me, sending money because my own sister had broadcast to the world that I was destitute. She hadn't even asked me. She hadn't mentioned this was her plan. She had taken my story, twisted it into a pathetic melodrama with herself as the hero, and posted it for the world to see. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it felt like a physical blow. The shame burned through me, hot and acidic. I wasn't just unemployed anymore. I was Jacqueline, the charity case, Victoria's little sister, the project. She hadn't taught me to fish. She had mounted my head on her wall as a trophy of her own magnanimity. And as I sat there, staring at my smiling face on that fundraising page, the initial shock and devastation slowly, surely, began to curdle into a cold, hard rage. The first thing I did was call her. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. The line rang once, twice, before she picked up, her voice sickeningly cheerful. "Jackie, did you see it? Isn't it amazing? We're already up to $1,500. People are so generous." "Take it down," I said, my voice low and shaking with fury. "Take it down right now." There was a pause. "What, darling, what are you talking about? This is a good thing. This is people wanting to help you." "You didn't help me, Victoria," I seethed, tears of rage and humiliation welling in my eyes. "You humiliated me. You took my private situation and turned it into a public performance for you to look like a saint. I asked you for a loan, not for you to parade my struggles in front of the entire world. How could you do this without even asking me?" Her cheerful tone instantly vanished, replaced by a defensive chill. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Jacqueline. I was trying to protect you from the awkwardness of being in my debt. This way, the money is a gift from a community that cares. There are no strings attached. Honestly, I thought you'd be grateful. Some people would kill to have a sister who would go to such lengths for them." "Grateful?" I choked out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "You think I should be grateful for this? You posted my picture and a story full of lies without my consent. You made me look helpless and pathetic. This wasn't for me, Victoria. This was for you. This was so all your rich friends could pat you on the back and tell you how wonderful you are for saving your poor little sister." "Well, if that's how you're going to be, then fine," she said icily. "I can't control your pride, but the fundraiser stays up. It's already getting traction, and frankly, you need the money. Maybe when your rent is paid, you'll see that I did what was best for you, even if you're too proud to admit it." And with that, she hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, my whole body trembling. The conversation had only confirmed what I already knew. This was a calculated act. The GoFundMe wasn't a misguided attempt to help. It was a power play. Victoria had found a way to both deny my request and simultaneously cast herself as a savior, all while reinforcing the narrative that she was the successful, capable sister, and I was the struggling artist who couldn't manage her own life. The humiliation was a feature, not a bug. The next 24 hours were a living nightmare. The post went viral in our extended social circle. My phone blew up with messages. Some were from well-meaning friends and former colleagues, offering genuine sympathy, but also inadvertently twisting the knife with every "I'm so sorry, I had no idea things were that bad." Others were from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, their messages dripping with a morbid curiosity disguised as concern. The worst were the comments on Victoria's post. They were a chorus of praise for her, lauding her big heart and selfless SB. "Ear it," Marcus even commented, "so proud of my wife, always thinking of others." It made my stomach turn. They were building a monument to their own virtue on the foundation of my personal crisis. I couldn't escape it. Every notification was a fresh wave of shame. I felt exposed, stripped bare in a public square I never asked to enter. My professional network was seeing this. Potential employers could see this. The narrative Victoria was crafting was that I was not just unemployed, but incompetent and destitute. How was I supposed to walk into a job interview and project confidence when a quick social media search painted me as a charity case? Chloe came over that night with a bottle of wine and a tub of ice cream, finding me huddled on my couch in a state of shock. She read the post, her face growing darker with every word. When she finished, she put her phone down and looked at me, her expression grim. "This is a character assassination, Jackie," she said, her legal mind immediately cutting through the emotional fog. "She's not just raising money, she's defining you to the world. And she's doing it in a way that makes you look weak and makes her look like a hero." We spent hours talking it through. Chloe helped me see past the blinding shame to the cold, hard strategy underneath. Victoria had always been competitive, always needing to be the one who was more successful, more admired. When I had come to her for help, I had given her the perfect opportunity to solidify that position. By refusing a private loan and launching a public fundraiser, she had maintained financial control and gained social capital in one fell swoop. The final straw came the next morning. I received an email from the GoFundMe platform, a notification that a withdrawal had been initiated. Victoria was transferring the funds, now over $5,000, not to my bank account, but to her own. The platform allows the organizer to be the beneficiary. She was collecting the money herself. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She was going to collect all the donations and then presumably dole the money out to me as she saw fit, making me come to her for every dollar. It was the ultimate act of control. She would be the gatekeeper of my own rescue fund. I would be completely at her mercy, forced to be grateful for the money that strangers had donated to me. That was it. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over, burning away the shame and the tears. The hurt was still there, but it was now forged into something else: resolve. Victoria wanted to write my story? Fine, but I would be the one to write the ending. She had publicly framed me as a pathetic victim. I would publicly prove her wrong. My comeback wouldn't be quiet. It would be just as loud and just as public as the humiliation she had forced upon me. The game was on. The first step was to take back control of my own finances, even if it meant scraping the bottom of the barrel. The GoFundMe was toxic. I couldn't touch a single dollar of that money. It was fruit of a poisoned tree. Every cent would have felt like an admission of the helplessness she had ascribed to me. I went into survival mode. I called my landlord, explained the situation with my job loss, omitting the family drama, and managed to negotiate a 2-week extension on my rent. I canceled all non-essential subscriptions, put my car insurance on a minimum plan, and created a Spartan budget that would make a monk wince. It was terrifying, but it was also empowering. Every small step I took on my own was a tiny rebellion against Victoria's narrative. Next, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. Chloe, with her sharp paralegal mind, became my co-conspirator. "We need to think like we're building a case," she said, sliding a legal pad across my coffee table. Victoria has presented her evidence to the public. We need to gather our own. Our first target was the GoFundMe itself. Chloe dug into the terms of service. While Victoria was within her rights as the organizer to be the beneficiary, there were clauses about fraudulent or misleading campaigns. Her claim that you're struggling for basic necessities is a manipulative exaggeration, Chloe pointed out. And the line about how she and Marcus are helping you personally in every way we can is a provable lie. She explicitly refused to help you. That's our angle. We documented everything. We took screenshots of the campaign page, of Victoria's post, of the comments, and of the text messages where I had pleaded with her to take it down. We saved the email notification showing she was directing the funds to her own account. It was a small but growing pile of evidence that painted a picture not of charity, but of deception. But just exposing the lie of the fundraiser wasn't enough. Victoria's power came from the flawless public image she had cultivated. To dismantle her narrative about me, I had to chip away the facade of her own perfect life. I knew she and Marcus were obsessed with appearances, but I suspected that behind the curtain of their sprawling mansion and luxury vacations, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. My investigation started with a deep dive into her social media history. I scrolled back years, looking past the glossy photos and into the details. I noticed patterns. Victoria often posted about her involvement in various charities, but her posts were always about the glamorous fundraising galas, never about the actual work the charities did. The focus was always on her dress, the celebrity guests, or the expensive champagne. It was all performance. Her brand, Victoria V Lifestyles, was built on an illusion of effortless elegance and philanthropy. The biggest breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I remembered that Victoria used a specific high-end local company for all her event planning and catering. On a hunch, I started looking into their public reviews and social media tags. Buried in the comments of an old post on the caterer's page, I found a disgruntled comment from a former employee who mentioned working a gala at the developer Marcus's house and complained about delayed payments. My heart started beating faster. I clicked on the commenter's profile. She was a freelance event coordinator. Taking a massive leap of faith, I crafted a careful message. I introduced myself as a graphic designer looking to expand my services into event branding and said I was researching local event planners. I asked if she would be willing to chat for a few minutes about her experience in the industry. She agreed. We met for coffee the next day. I started with general questions, but eventually I steered the conversation toward her experience working with high-net-worth clients, vaguely mentioning Marcus's name as an example of a prominent local figure. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, him," she said, stirring her latte with a little too much force. "Let me give you some free advice. Get your money up front. That man is rich, but he's slow to pay. And his wife, she's a piece of work. Demands the world, treats the staff like they're invisible, and then tries to haggle the price down after the event is over." Bingo! She went on to describe how Victoria and Marcus were notorious among local vendors for squeezing every last penny, demanding freebies in exchange for exposure on Victoria's social media, and consistently paying their invoices weeks or even months late. They maintained their image of wealth by shortchanging the very people who helped create it. This was gold. It directly contradicted the image of the generous philanthropists they projected to the world. Chloe was ecstatic when I told her. "This is perfect," she said. "It's a pattern of behavior. They exploit small businesses while pretending to be pillars of the community." The final piece of the puzzle was the charity gala Victoria had mentioned when I first called her. It was the annual fundraising event for the Children's Arts Foundation, the city's most prestigious children's charity. Victoria was on the event committee. Her social media was already full of posts about planning the gala, touting it as the city's premier philanthropic event. I went to the foundation's official website. There, listed on the gala committee page, was my sister's name, along with the names of some of the city's wealthiest and most influential people. I also found a list of their corporate sponsors. My old marketing firm, the one that had just laid me off, was a major sponsor. I still had contacts there. I still had relationships. a plan began to form in my mind, a risky and audacious plan. It wasn't just about exposing Victoria's lies on social media. It was about confronting her in her own arena, on her biggest stage, in front of the very people whose approval she craved most. She had put me in a public spotlight against my will. Now, I was going to step into it myself, on my own terms. The humiliation she had caused me was about to become the fuel for a spectacular fire. With a clear goal in sight, the scattered pieces of my anger and hurt began to coalesce into a focused, methodical plan. Chloe and I dubbed it Operation Counter-Narrative. The objective was twofold. First, to neutralize the damage from the GoFundMe by creating a new, more powerful story about myself. And second, to expose Victoria's hypocrisy in a way she couldn't spin or ignore. My first move was to address the GoFundMe directly, but not by attacking Victoria. That would look petty and just create more drama. Instead, I would rise above it. I filmed a short, simple video on my phone. I set it up in my apartment with my design books visible in the background. I looked directly into the camera, my expression calm and composed. "Hi everyone," I began. "My name is Jacqueline, and some of you may have recently seen a fundraiser started on my behalf. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who donated out of the kindness of their hearts. Your impulse to help someone in a tough spot is a beautiful thing, and it means the world to me. However, the fundraiser was created without my knowledge or consent, and the narrative it presents isn't one I'm comfortable with." I took a breath. It's true that I was recently laid off, along with my entire department. It was a shock, and it's been a challenging time. But what the fundraiser doesn't show is my resolve. It doesn't show the incredible support I've received from true friends, or the fact that I've already started my own freelance design business. I've always believed in the power of hard work and standing on your own 2 feet. Then came the crucial part. For that reason, I continued, I cannot in good conscience accept these donations. Instead, I have asked the organizer to refund every single dollar. But I don't want to waste this incredible outpouring of generosity. So, I'm redirecting this energy. I've included a link below to the Children's Arts Foundation, a wonderful local charity that my sister, the fundraiser's organizer, is also very passionate about. If you are moved to give, please consider sending your support their way. They do incredible work for kids in our community. As for me, my new freelance website is also linked below. If you or your business needs design work, I'm officially open for business. Thank you for listening. I posted the video on all my social media channels. The effect was immediate and dramatic. It was a masterstroke of turning the tables. I hadn't insulted Victoria. In fact, I had praised her chosen charity. But in one calm, dignified statement, I had reclaimed my own story. I wasn't a victim. I was a resilient professional. I wasn't accepting charity. I was redirecting it. And most importantly, I had turned her public spectacle into a marketing opportunity for my new business. The comments poured in. "So much class and grace," one person wrote. "What a powerful response," said another. My former colleagues shared it, praising my professionalism. Crucially, people started clicking the link to my new portfolio website. I had stayed up for 48 hours straight building it, a sleek, professional site that showcased my best work. Within a day, I had 3 serious freelance inquiries. Simultaneously, Chloe drafted a formal, legally worded email to GoFundMe's trust and safety team on my behalf. It laid out the facts. The campaign was created without my consent. It contained misleading information, and I, the intended beneficiary, was formally requesting its termination and a full refund to all donors. We attached the screenshots and the link to my video as evidence. Faced with a clear, documented request from the person the campaign was supposed to be for, the platform had no choice. Within 24 hours, they froze the campaign and initiated the refund process. Victoria must have been furious, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't argue against refunding the donors without looking greedy. She couldn't attack my video without looking cruel. I had checkmated her on the social media board. Phase 2 was the Gala. The Children's Arts Foundation Gala was the biggest high society event of the season, and Victoria's role on the committee meant her reputation was intrinsically tied to its success. This was my stage. I called my old boss, David, from the marketing firm that had laid me off. We had always had a good relationship. I explained that I had started my own freelance business and wanted to offer my services, pro bono, to design the brochures and digital presentation for the gala auction. It was a win-win. The charity got professional design work for free, my old firm, as a sponsor, looked good, and I got a legitimate reason to be there and a platform for my work. David loved the idea. He made the introduction to the foundation's director, who was thrilled by the offer. I was now officially involved in the gala. I had access to the event schedule, the list of auction items, and the program, and that's where I found my weapon. The climax of the evening was the Heart of the Arts Award given to a patron for outstanding contributions. This year, the recipient was a well-respected, elderly philanthropist. Following the award, there was a paddle raise auction, a direct appeal for cash donations, which was being personally led by my sister, Victoria. She would be on stage, with a microphone in front of the city's most powerful people, giving a speech about the importance of generosity. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I now had everything I needed. My design work for the event was impeccable, earning me praise from the foundation director. My freelance business was gaining traction. The GoFundMe was a closed chapter. All that was left was the final act. I bought a ticket to the gala. I wasn't going as a guest of a sponsor or as a volunteer. I was going as a business owner. A donor, and Jacqueline, the author of my own story. The night of the gala arrived, cloaked in an atmosphere of glittering chandeliers and the low hum of expensive chatter. I walked into the grand ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel, feeling a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had spent more than I should have on a simple but elegant dark blue gown. It wasn't as flashy as the designer creations worn by most of the women there, but it was professional and confident. It was my armor. I saw Victoria across the room, holding court near the main stage. She was wearing a blindingly bright, sequined dress, laughing a little too loudly with a group of people that included her husband, Marcus. When her eyes met mine, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She looked surprised and then annoyed to see me there. I simply gave her a small, polite nod and continued to the bar, getting a glass of sparkling water. I needed to keep a clear head. For the first part of the evening, I played my part. I networked, speaking with representatives from the corporate sponsors, including my old boss who greeted me warmly. I introduced myself as the designer behind the event's beautiful program brochures, a fact that earned me several compliments and a few business cards. I was building my own presence, my own legitimacy, in this room where Victoria believed she reigned supreme. I could feel her watching me, her expression a tight mask of displeasure. My being there, confident and independent, completely undermined the poor, helpless sister, narrative she had tried so hard to sell. The dinner service concluded and the formal program began. The speeches were long, the awards were presented, and finally the moment I was waiting for arrived. The auctioneer announced the final fundraising event of the night, the paddle raise for the foundation's scholarship fund, and he introduced the person who would be leading it, a woman with a heart as big as her passion for the arts, our very own committee member, Victoria Sterling. Victoria glided onto the stage, beaming under the spotlight. She approached the podium and launched into a syrupy, pre-written speech about the power of giving. "Generosity," she said, her voice echoing through the silent ballroom, "is the truest measure of a person's character. It's about seeing a need and meeting it without hesitation. It's about lifting up those who have fallen on hard times and helping them find their footing again." My hands clenched under the table. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She continued for a few more minutes, her voice dripping with false sentiment. Finally, she arrived at the crescendo. "So I ask you tonight to open your hearts and your wallets. We will start the bidding at the $10,000 level. Who will be the first to show their profound commitment to the children of our city?" An expectant hush fell over the room. This was it. This was my moment. Before anyone else could move, I stood up. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a drum, but my voice, when I spoke, was clear and steady. All heads turned towards me. Victoria's eyes widened in shock. I will, I said, raising my bidding paddle. A murmur went through the crowd. $10,000 was a significant pledge. Victoria was momentarily speechless, her scripted presentation thrown completely off course. She forced a tight smile. Well, it seems we have our first generous donation from Jacqueline, my sister. How wonderful. She tried to use it to her advantage, a demonstration of her family's supposed magnanimity, but I wasn't finished. On one condition, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. Victoria's smile froze. I will pledge $10,000 tonight, but I would like to make a public statement about why this cause is so important to me, and I challenge the vendors of this event to join me. The auctioneer and the foundation director looked at each other, confused, but the audience was captivated. They could smell the drama. Denying a donor of that size a moment at the microphone would look terrible. The director gave a hesitant nod. A cordless microphone was brought to my table. I took it, my hand steady. "Good evening," I began, my eyes sweeping across the room before finally landing on my sister, who looked like a deer in the headlights. "My name is Jacqueline, and like my sister said, I am a passionate supporter of the arts, but I am also a small business owner, a freelance graphic designer. In fact, I design the programs you're all holding tonight." I paused, letting that sink in. Recently, I fell on some hard times after being laid off. In a moment of crisis, I learned a very valuable lesson about the difference between charity as a performance and true, meaningful support. I learned that real support doesn't involve public humiliation. Real support is paying your invoices on time. I looked directly at the table where the owner of the Touring company was sitting. His eyes widened slightly. Real support, I continued, is valuing the work of the vendors, the caterers, the planners, the designers, who make an event like this possible, instead of demanding discounts and delaying payments, putting their small businesses at risk. Another murmur rippled through the audience. I could see Marcus's face turning a dangerous shade of red. "So tonight," I declared, my voice ringing with conviction, "I am making my pledge. And I am publicly announcing that for the next year, I will be donating 5% of my new company's profits to this foundation. And I challenge the other vendors in this room who have ever been asked for a social media exposure discount or had to wait months to be paid by some of this city's wealthiest patrons to pledge what you can. As for my $10,000 donation, I will make it tonight, in honor of all the hardworking small business owners who form the backbone of our city's economy." I placed the microphone back on the table. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, the event planner I'd had coffee with stood up and began to applaud. Then the caterer. Then someone from the lighting company. Within seconds, the entire room, minus a few horrified faces at Victoria's table, was giving me a standing ovation. Victoria stood frozen on the stage, her face pale, the spotlight illuminating her utter humiliation. Her speech about generosity was in tatters, exposed as a hollow performance. I hadn't called her out by name for the fundraiser, but I didn't have to. I had exposed the hypocrisy of her and Marcus's business practices in a room full of their peers and clients. I had taken her stage and used it to tell a new story, not one of a charity case, but of a resilient, principled entrepreneur. The unveiling was complete. The aftermath of the gala was swift and decisive. While Victoria and Marcus made a hasty exit, I was surrounded by people. The vendors Victoria had stiffed came up to thank me, sharing knowing glances. Several business owners pressed their cards into my hand, expressing admiration for my courage and inquiring about my design services. The director of the foundation, though initially flustered, was ecstatic about the unexpected wave of pledges from other vendors and praised my innovative fundraising. By the end of the night, my freelance business had more solid leads than I could have dreamed of. I had walked into that gala as Victoria's humiliated little sister. I walked out as a respected and sought-after professional. The fallout for Victoria was catastrophic, precisely because I had never mentioned her name in connection with the GoFundMe. I had simply drawn a clear, undeniable line between performative charity and genuine support. The society pages and local blogs, however, had no such restraint. The story was too juicy to ignore. Mystery at the Arts Gala. Designer's speech puts philanthropists on notice. read one headline. Another was more direct. Sources say brand consultant Victoria Sterling's fundraising efforts questioned by sister. People connected the dots. The story of the fundraiser, which had previously been a minor anecdote in her social circle, was now re-examined in a new light. Her selfless act now looked like exactly what it was, a publicity stunt. Her reputation as a compassionate philanthropist was shattered overnight. The clients who hired her for her image and connections began to distance themselves. Her brand, built on a foundation of illusion, crumbled when exposed to the truth. A week later, a check for $5,000 arrived in my mailbox. There was no note, no card, just a personal check from Victoria, enclosed in a plain white envelope. It was the exact amount I had originally asked her for as a loan. It wasn't an apology, and I knew it. It was a desperate, pathetic attempt to silence me, to retroactively make the problem go away. I took the check, walked to my bank, and deposited it. Then I immediately wrote a personal check for the same amount to the Children's Arts Foundation and mailed it to them with a note explaining it was an additional donation on behalf of my new business. I sent Victoria the donation receipt. I would not be bought, and I would not be in her debt. The relationship with my sister was, of course, completely severed. We didn't speak again. The silence was a relief. The dynamic of our entire lives, her as the shining star, me as the quiet shadow, had been built on a false premise. Now that it was broken, there was nothing left. My parents, who had tried to stay out of it, were caught in the middle, but even they couldn't defend Victoria's actions once the full story came out. Their disappointment in her was palpable. In the months that followed, my life transformed. The freelance business that was born out of desperation thrived. The courage I had shown at the gala became my brand. Clients came to me not just for my design skills, but because they respected my integrity. I was able to move into a slightly larger apartment with a dedicated office space. I had stability, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the fragile stability of relying on a single employer. It was the resilient strength I had built myself, brick by brick. About a year after the gala, Chloe and I were having dinner to celebrate the one-year anniversary of my business. We raised our glasses to toast. "To writing your own narrative," she said with a proud smile. I smiled back, feeling a profound sense of peace. The humiliation Victoria had tried to bury me under had become the fertile ground from which my new life had grown. She had wanted to frame me as a charity case, dependent on her. Instead, she had forced me to become more independent and powerful than I had ever been. She had tried to rob me of my dignity, and in doing so, had shown me where my true strength was. My inheritance from my family was never going to be money. Victoria and her husband had made that clear. But I realized I had received a different kind of inheritance. It was the resilience my mother had shown when she raised us, the quiet determination of my father, the unwavering loyalty of a friend like Chloe. Those were the true assets, the things that couldn't be bought or sold or put on display at a fancy gala. Victoria could keep her mansion and her hollow reputation. I had something far more valuable, a life I was proud of, built not with borrowed money, but with my own two hands. And that was a foundation that no one could ever crack.